Hello there. Today I wanted to take a look at a sweet wine from southwest France. The wine I have is not actually from Bordeaux, it's from Monbazillac. So this is Chateau Belingard, and this is a reserve wine that they make. So, Chateau Belingard in Monbazillac. There's a lovely positioning here. The estates overlook the Dordogne Valley, so we're slightly further east from Bordeaux. And the vines for Chateau Belingard are located in two villages. First of all, Pomport, which is one of the most important locations for the growing of Monbazillac, and also Monestier. And high quality wines from the Bergerac and Montbazillac appellations have been produced at this property, they say, for 7 generations. Now the name Chateau Belingard comes from the name Belen and Goard. So evidently that translates as Garden of the Gods. And this is a site where habitation has been traced back almost 3,000 years to Celtic settlers. But vineyards were first planted here by monks in the 10th century. And the estate was acquired by the Bosredon family, who currently own it, back in the 1820s. And today, Laurent Bosredon and his wife Sylvie, my notes say that Laurent is the 5th generation of his family to run the estate. Now the estate is currently 90 hectares in size, so a fair size, but remember they're making both Monbazillac and Bergerac wines here, and so 35 hectares of that are red wines and 55 hectares are white, and they're also making dry wines, of course. Now the winery cultivates numerous varieties, so for reds they're growing Merlot, Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc and Malbec, and then for whites they're growing Semillon, Sauvignon Blanc, Sauvignon Gris and Muscadel. So the vineyards sit on the slopes of the Dordogne Valley, and you tend to find that there's sort of more limestone higher up the hills and more clay lower down. And the Monbazillac vineyards evidently are situated on the limestone soils at the top of the hill here. Average altitude is somewhere between 130 and 200 metres above sea level, and they have a good portion of mature vines, and the average vine age here is somewhere between 25 and 30 years. So the process here is very much as practiced in Sauternes. You're harvesting overripe grapes that have been concentrated with the help of noble rot, of botrytis, which has managed to shrivel the berries and so concentrated the acids and the sugars inside them and give them some wonderful flavours as well. And so the picking of these grapes goes on a series of passes through the vineyards, and that'll happen in October and sometimes in early November as well. So obviously all the fruit has to be hand picked, and as I said, there are this series of trees, so they'll go through and they'll select out the ripe berries and leave everything else and come back for those at a later stage. So really painstaking picking these wines. The blend here is predominantly Sauvignon, and then there's 15%, according to the label it says 15% Sauvignon and 15% Muscadel. And from a video I've seen, I'm led to believe that the Sauvignon they're referring to is principally Sauvignon Gris. There may be a tiny amount of Sauvignon Blanc in as well, which may be why they simply refer to it as Sauvignon, but I think the majority of it's Sauvignon Gris. And one of the things to note about Monbazillac is actually that here they don't have as much problem with virus infection in their Muscadel, so often that will give a lovely aromatic clean sweetness in a way that you don't get in Sauternes. So as pressing goes on, they will collect different fractions of that pressing. So the earliest pressings will be the lightest and freshest, and the last ones will be the richest and the heaviest in sugar. And by collecting those separately, that'll give you some wonderful blending options. After pressing, the wines are put into vat to settle, and then fermentation goes on. Now my understanding is that this ferments in oak, and I think that is in barrel, and cooling enables them to regulate temperatures to about 20 degrees C. So a fairly warm fermentation, but one moderated by the air conditioning. When the balance of sugar and alcohol reaches the desired level, at that stage the wines will be chilled to stop the action of the yeasts. They're then very carefully dosed with just the right amount of sulphur to stop the yeast from functioning, and thus they can stay as a sweet wine. The wine is then put into vat for a couple of days just to settle, and then they say return to barrel or vat to continue aging for 15 months. Now I don't know whether everything goes back into barrel or whether a portion stays in vat or not. And barrel aging lasts for 15 months. I should also have said they practice environmentally friendly management of the vineyards, so that they're actually certified as being of high environmental value. And they say the purpose of this is to reduce the estate's ecological footprint. So let's have a look at the wine, shall we? First thing to say, it's a really deep yellow, or to I mean, I guess just the palest hint of gold. The wine has just 12.5% alcohol, but it does have 90 grams per litre of sugar, so I'd expect it to be reasonably viscous, but it's not particularly throwing heavy tears in the glass. So let's see what we make of the aroma, shall we? There's an enticing fruity richness. I mean, to me, that has aromas of ripe pineapple, perhaps of tinned peaches. There's a sort of a syrup note to the whole thing. There's perhaps a little toastiness behind everything. And there are hints of honey as well. So let's have a taste. On the palate, that's lovely and sweet, and fully sweet. It's not very sweet, but there's a lovely freshness, and there are notes orange blossom, touches of lime, and there's a lovely, rich, almost sort of slightly almondy marzipan texture. There's touches of honey, but really for the mid palate, what's really coming through there is this sort of rich, tropical, pineapple-y fruit, and I suppose that underpinning that, there's a bit of ripe sort of apricot sort of notes as well. There are hints of vanilla. There's a little bit of toastiness towards the finish. In fact, there's a growing amount of toastiness towards the finish. There's some quite nice freshness, but the finish is only of medium length. It's got that richness and roundness, and I'm left with a relatively sweet, slightly marzipan-y note, and then there's a little bit of citric freshness. So for a sweet wine, this is a mid-weight. It's not incredibly sweet, it's got a good level of sweetness. It's in very nice balance. I mean, certainly on the attack, the balance between lovely fresh acidity and nice clean tropical fruit sweetness is very nicely balanced. There are some nice bits of complexity. The oaking here is quite delicate, so I mean that would actually make some sense to me about the notes, about whether the wine aged entirely in barrel or whether some of it spent some time in vat. Just sort of pulling back that oak a little bit. I think the wine's complexity, I think its concentration probably would allow it to age for 6 or 7 years quite happily. This is not going to be a sweet wine that you can leave in your cellar for decades, but why would you want to? Such lovely, attractive, fresh fruit. This is a wine that I think sweet wine lovers will enjoy popping the cork on. Got a freshness and some lovely aromatics that probably make it lighter and more delicate than most sauternes at this sort of quality level. And yet it seems to have greater complexity than something you'd get from a Premier Côte de Bordeaux. So I think a really enjoyable wine. Certainly one that's been very interesting to look at. Thank you very much for joining us. I hope you found the tasting of interest. If you have, do please feel free to press the like button. Do consider signing up and following us on YouTube. That way you can set up a notification every time we publish a new video, so you don't miss out. I've added a link in the notes below that you can follow to find out how much it costs, where you can buy it, and to find any more information that we have relating to it. If you have any comments, please leave those in the comments box below. We'd love to hear your feedback. But most importantly, do please try and find some time. Come and join us for another tasting in the near future, won't you? Thanks again. Bye for now.